I've had today to get here to the studio. We were supposed to have done this taping on Monday, and then something came up. The snow, of course, is a constant, and that's going to happen for a few more months before we get out of here with spring and then the summer. It's called the seasons, the four seasons, not just a singing group, but we do have four seasons. So don't get surprised about the change in the weather, and don't start talking about climate change. We've had that. We've had climate change ever since we've been here, and it's gotten. If you start in the ice age, it's a lot better down than it was then. And you can't say global warming because at one time the whole Earth was covered with ice, and we've thawed out some. So that's climate change. And we're here at the studio and kind of glad to be here. We've had a lot of different things that came up, and we got everything ironed out now. I'm ready to start another edition of the program called "What's Going on Flint's #1 podcast program, and that's allpointstv.com. And very glad to have our cohorts in crime. That's everything but Facebook. Facebook doesn't take us right now, but that's okay. We're going to eventually win them over. By the way, they're being won over right now because look how they have actually backed off of a lot of things that Facebook was doing, and now claiming that they've turned over a new leaf. They've donated $1 million to the inauguration that's going to happen in another 5 days. We're looking forward to that, of course. And it's just amazing. Of course, I must tell you that Mark Zuckerberg 4 years ago, he's donating $1 million to the inaugural time that Trump is going to be stepping back into the White House. But he gave $400 million to Donald Trump's defeat 4 years ago. So has he changed his mind? No, the politics of the moment have driven him to this newfound, what am I going to call this? A newfound enlightenment. He's more enlightened now than he was 4 years ago, but he donated $400 million, 400, yeah, $400 million to Donald Trump's defeat. And now he's pledging $1 million to get on the good side, to get on the good foot during the latest campaign, to be on the right side of those in power, because these persons will come after you, and this lawfare is real in this country. And if anybody doubts it's real, let's see what happens on the first day after the inauguration of Donald Trump, and see if he goes through with pardoning all these people who have been illegally put in jail by their own government. First of all, set up to be put in jail by the government, and then put in jail by the government. And there's not going to be any restitution because the government can, in fact, excuse itself from any penalties imposed by the government. Who's going to impose the penalties upon the government? But that should be, and I'm calling for in my article today. I'm calling for some people. Some people got to go to jail. That's the bottom line. We got to put some people in jail in this country and make a statement about some things we're not going to stand for in terms of this lawfare, which has been going on. Let's see, it's been going on really. You'd be surprised how long this stuff been going on in this country, because they've been doing lawfare. They're not gonna like me saying this, but we've been doing lawfare in this country ever since John Marshall, the fourth Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, and Marshall reign of terror started in 1800. He was he was the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court from 1801 to 1835, and the person that came after him, it's 34 years of tyranny right there. And then after him, there was Roger B. Taney, and Taney was in there for 20 some odd years. And so we have this lawfare. See, people think this lawfare just started with what they did in getting Donald Trump out of there, and that's lawfare for sure. And Merchant is still engaging in it by doing what he just did, and then at the end of that lawfare he was in fact waging against Donald Trump, he wants to tell him at the end of it is a mockery, Godspeed. You might have to go up there and smack him one, but you can't do that because these persons are protected. Yeah, they're wearing a robe. They're protected by the lawmakers, the lawbreakers, and that's the problem. The lawmakers are now the lawbreakers. That's what lawfare is. But we've had this lawfare. I want you to be aware of something. We've had this lawfare for a while, and it just didn't start with what they have done since 2020, which they used lawfare to get Donald Trump out of office by, in fact, creating the circumstance in which they were able to give a cover for the theft of the election in 2020. That's what happened there. And somebody need to read out this article today. One reason I came to the studio late is because my phone wouldn't stop ringing, and I'm writing the most complex article I've ever written, and something that's never been said before in the history of this country. And I made some points, constitutional points, that nobody's ever made in this country, and nobody's going to come behind me and say that what I said, they stand in correction of it. They don't have that person in the country yet. That's just a fact. And all these constitutional scholars and these originalists, they call them originalists and so on and so forth. I said today in my post, the originalists are just as bad as the non-originalists. Both of them, neither one of them, the originalists and the non-originalists, neither one of them on the same street as the Constitution of the United States.
Okay, that's what I was going to say. Well, let's cover ground because you don't know who your listener might be. Let's go a little bit briefly about what's originalist and non-originalist means in the Constitution.
Thank you, John. John is always there in the studio. He's kind of my backup when I start going off on these tangents, and I need to come back and say some things here about that. I don't have. I'm going to tell you who the originalists are, who they say they are, but they're not who they say they are either. Just not as bad as those who are claiming to be other than the originalists. The originalists are just as bad as the liberals. The originalists are people like Clarence Thomas, Alito, the late these judges that claim that they are interpreting the Constitution as it was in fact written, and they are going back to the original claims behind the construction of the Constitution. These are the ideas that the framers had in mind when they wrote the original document. And that would be 7 articles, and we're so far removed from that today that the framers would not recognize anything, including the additions that were added to it. We've had 27 amendments to it, and anybody talking about original intent, how much of the original intent is carried forward by the amendments? Because the amendments have carried us further and further away from the intent, and none of the intent can be found in the amendments. What is the original intent was that you could amend the document, but are the amendments in the purview of the original intent? I've said here a number of times, and I don't stand corrected because nobody in this country is qualified to correct me. Now they're going to have objection to that because they came out of schools considered to be higher than where I have my degrees. But I'll tell you this, and I'm going to be very careful in saying this. These scholars from these schools considered higher than Eastern and other colleges I've attended, because I've attended all the major colleges in the state of Michigan. But these scholars that are claiming they have a higher view, their view is considered higher because their universities are the universities where the government chooses its leaders from. It took me a long time to find that, to understand that, because I knew that their training was not higher because I heard what they were talking about on television, and I disagreed with what they're saying on television because what they're saying on TV cannot be out of the construction of the Constitution of the United States. That I know. And I had to figure out, why would their training be considered higher than my training when what they're saying cannot be enjoined by the document they claim to be interpreting. It took me a long time to understand how that could be true. People like Alan Dershowitz, and see, I call their names out. People like Alan Dershowitz, he didn't know anything about the Constitution of the United States. And Jonathan Turley is also alongside of that. I make the claim that he doesn't know anything about it either. These are lawyers that are above their grade level. You can take that or let it alone. But they're not going to call here and correct anything I'm saying. I've been calling them out for 2 years on the same networks they're on. We're not too far from the visual representation of our scholarship from each other. We're on the same networks. They're on the same networks I'm on, and I tune them in because I'm tuning in my own programs and things like that. I can run across them, and they are no doubt run across what I'm saying, and I'm telling them to their face. They're not going to say anything. They're not qualified to say anything. What are they going to say when they're saying the things they're saying? They're saying things like things that are laughable. That you have to have. Adam Dershowitz made this comment on television. He's still saying it. You have to have treason, bribery, and other high crimes and misdemeanors in order to bring about impeachment. And that guy was up there arguing for Donald Trump on them trying to bring about the man's removal based upon what they had impeached upon. He's up there defending it and still making the claim that you have to have the claim of treason, bribery, and other high crimes and misdemeanors to bring about impeachment. Where is that found in the Constitution, Alan Dershowitz? You tell me where that's found, and I'll tell you where it is in the document. Nowhere. These people, these people are cartoon characters, and they're not going to say anything behind what I'm saying. And I'm going to tell them why they're not going to say anything behind what I say. They're not qualified to say anything. I called them out time and time and time again, but I'm not on TV, so therefore they don't have to answer. I'll tell you somebody else they don't answer. In another genre, he's not in my field, but he's in another area of scholarship. They do the same thing to Thomas Sowell that they do to me. They act like we don't exist. That's the ultimate way of not answering our claims. Don't acknowledge it. I know why they don't acknowledge it in the area that I'm in. Sowell has to answer for himself in terms of the area that that he's in. He's not in, but he's not in this area either. He's not in this area. And he's out of his league in this area here. I respect his scholarship in the areas that he's in, but he's not in this area. But I have to respect him because I read his writings. And I know the man knows something. But they do to him what they do to me in my area, and that's just simply do not admit that we exist. And they better continue to do that in this area because they come over here. This is more than bubblegum over here. Bubblegum chewing over here. I have to tell you that they just not in it. They're just not in this area. They think that they are because they're lawyers, but that's what I had to figure that out too. Why are they saying what they're saying if they're constitutional scholars? I had to figure out upon what basis are they saying this, and I had to figure that out over time because I kept listening to them. And that's where did they come from? And it took me a while to catch up on the game that's being run here. And the game they're running is that they are legalists. They have legalist training. I have constitutional training. And I found you'd be surprised. I've been through all of it. And it just has been very frustrating to me to have to listen to these people who claim to be in this field, who are not in this field. These people are trained lawyers. And that's a different training. Let me say it succinctly. That's a different training. The originalists are those that were in that room. Those are the originalists. But I had to understand something else even about that, and that is, and I had to understand how that could be the case if they're all originalists in that room about everything that was happening in that room. I had to go back and see how that could. I tell you what made me go down that street was how are they impeaching William Blount? And that's the thing that set me off in terms of how could that be if the originalists allowed that to happen? Well, I had to figure out what that was about, and that was about the originalists there in that room, not originalists in terms of every aspect of what they are in fact drafting that became the document upon which we base the Constitution of the United States. A draft of the document was made there, with the finalization of the document made elsewhere. Can we understand that? The draft of the document was in 1787, September the 17th, when they left Philadelphia. They had a draft of the document. But that's not the ratification of the document. The ratification of the document happens a year later. And then on top of that, because it has a provision in Article 5 of how to amend the document, the amendment of the document will come 3 years after the ratification of the document. That will be in 1791, when they are now setting into motion the amendments to the document, 10 of them all at one time in what's called the Bill of Rights. And how much is that a delegation away from the original intent? It's as if we think that to amend the document is to maintain the original intent. Has anybody ever said that before in the country? I'm going to tell you this. I wrote an article today on Facebook because I can gleefully write on Facebook now without having to worry so much. I don't know when it's going to change. Without having to worry so much about saving everything I'm writing before they erase it. Because a lot of times I write on Facebook the equivalent of 2 books a year. That's the equivalent of my writing on Facebook. I read the longest articles on Facebook. And I stand uncorrected on everything I've written on Facebook about the Constitution. I stand uncorrected. And you scholars that listen to this program out there that disagree with me on that, don't stay in the background. Come out and show me where the error is located. That's a challenge I throw out there for you. And I'm stating it publicly, and I want you to challenge me publicly. Don't just be in these little rooms watching what we do here and then staying quiet. Come out publicly and make the challenge. What's that song called? That'll be the day. That'll be the day. Not the day that I die. That's the song, the rest of the song. That'll be the day. Because I don't see any scholars out there capable of making this challenge. I don't see them. And they certainly don't put them on television because if they say what I'm saying, they're not on television. The mere fact they're on TV is an indication that they're not saying what I say, and that is a statement about their qualifications too. Because they don't put people on TV. They're not. Nobody. Let me tell you something. The people that run this country are not going to employ people to overthrow them. I mean, what would you have to be to do that? You have to be crazy to do that. So these persons on TV, you got to watch the people they put on television. And if they claim, if they are on the Supreme Court and they claim to be originalists and they mean that, then do they recognize that amendments have been added to the document? Because if you're an originalist, you have to be aware of the fact that the document originally just consisted of 7 articles written in the Constitution. And it's been amended 27 times. Well, 18 times, to be honest, because the first 10 were added to the Constitution at a single time. There were 12 of them that were, in fact, written. I'm sorry. There were 22 amendments that were written out of that 10 that were added that they forwent, and they were not included in the first 10 amendments to the document. But the first 10 amendments to the Constitution were all added at one time, 3 years after the ratification of the document in 1788. And then 3 years later, because, and I think this is because of the shotgun effect, the Winchester effect, the musket effect of the framers, that they had promised, 3 of them, they would come behind the ratification. They promised all of them, quite frankly, to come behind the document as drawn up in Philadelphia, that they would come behind them at some point and add their objections to the document and give more cover to chaining down government, because that's what Federalist Paper 51 is about. Further chaining down the government. That's what Madison's talking about, and that's what they had promised to do, and they followed through on it, because not to have done it, given the temperament of those people. I have a lot of respect for them, because they were serious about what they were talking about, and when they claim that they're going to come behind them and add to the document and put further restraints upon power, they did that. But they did it because they knew the people that they had promised that to would not stand them to do otherwise. we need some days. Mama told me there would be days like this. We need some more days like those days. Because when they promised that, and look what they did once they promised it. They ratified based upon their promise. And the people that promised it dared not go back on what they had promised to do and then did it 3 years later. With a certainty it was going to be done. And they were still alive when they did that. Their word was their bond, and it was backed up. If you don't think it was backed up, go read this book by Ron Chernow about Alexander Hamilton and see what happened to Hamilton in 1804. Go back and read about what happened to Hamilton. Hamilton was one of the great minds at that convention. But when he said some things that were offensive to Aaron Burr, Burr demanded, what's that word they used? He demanded retribution or restitution. Let's put it that way. He demanded satisfaction. And you know, from history, at least they've told you this in history class, what happened to Alexander Hamilton, one of the great founders of the country, by the way. He's not my favorite of the founders, but I have to recognize his genius. He's not my favorite founder. And we're living in Alexander Hamilton's America today. But I have to respect his scholarship because he's smart. Because the question is always who's the smartest in that room, and he was one of the original thinkers in that room. He was an originalist in that room. Now, John Marshall, from 1801 to 1835, nope. There's nothing that John Marshall had to say about what happened in that room until they put him up there as a fourth Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. And his whole 34 years in that position was almost like an abomination to what they had done in that room. You can talk about John Marshall until you're blue in the face. John Marshall was a threat to this country. And the first one to practice lawfare in this country. The first to do that, well, 1801 was a year in which Thomas Jefferson institutionally set up upon John Adams, because the election of 1800, with Jefferson now taking over the presidency that the following year, 1801, we elect the president in the even year every 4 years, and then they take office in the odd year every 4 years. So in 1801, with that, which had happened in 1800, when they set upon the presidency of John Adams, and that was a combination of James Madison on the one hand, the father of the Constitution, and his alliance with Thomas Jefferson, the framer of the Declaration of Independence. These two giants. I have a lot of respect for both of them, but they're not above correction. not after 200 years of having a record to look back at. And all of us have a record to look back at. And when we have a record to look back at it, look at it with certain stars, but don't let the stars don't let the stars don't let the stars get, what's that song, Mark Barry Como? Don't let the stars get in your eyes, don't let the moon, something like that. Perry Como song. Don't let the moon break your heart, something like that he was singing about. Don't let the stars, you should have stars in your of those persons that did what they did in this country, but let the stars blind you to critiquing what they did. I love the legitimacy of the framers of this country who had a view and worked on that view from May 25th, 1787 to September 17th of that year. And they were steadfast in what they did in that room. They did some great work in that room. Work that's been copied by every generation that came after them in every country that came after them have copied what they did in that room, that vision that they had. And they were steadfast on that vision, but that does not make them perfect. And it does not make them above criticism of things that they did, which they are fallible just like anyone else. And they ought to be celebrated, but not worshiped. Can I make that point without you scholars getting mad? Because I know they're mad at me. And they must be champing at the bit because there's nothing they can do about it. There's nothing they're qualified to do about it. I'm here. And I'm sorry to tell them that what you're saying on TV, you scholars on television, what you're saying is an embarrassment. Let me say something here that I didn't come to the studio to say. I have to go off script and say this. What they're doing today on television with these confirmation hearings, folks, I gotta tell you something. This is a little secret. And this secret is out of the bag because I'm letting it out of the bag deliberately. What they're doing in Washington today with these confirmation hearings, and Dick jacked up Hegseth yesterday, and they got Pam Bondi up there having to go up there and shine their shoes today in his confirmation hearings. Let me tell you something, little secret. And I'm gonna ask a question here. I want the scholars to answer this question. Where is that authorized? And because I can always answer my own question, I'm gonna tell you where it's authorized. It's authorized by the television cameras. I talked about this today in my post. It's out there. And there's not one scholar in this country that's going to answer it. What I wrote. Beyond their comprehension of what I wrote. Some things that nobody in this country has ever said before. Article 1, Article 2, Section 2, Clause 2 of the Constitution does not authorize what they're doing in Washington today. There is no authorization, constitutional authorization for it. Do you scholars agree with that? You're not saying anything about it, and it's going on right past you without objection. I object to it. And I ask this question, where is it authorized? It's authorized by the television cameras. It's the same authorization, by the way, that you have for why they're now doing the State of the Union address in person, which they didn't start that until Woodrow Wilson. Yeah, it's stated in the Constitution in Article 2, Section 2, Clause 3 of the Constitution, where the president shall give the State of the Union address, but he used to give that in writing. But now that it can be a media event, and by that, the office holder can show some relevance in front of the public by radio or television, that now is no longer sent there to be read as a State of the Union address. The president gives it himself. But who has authorized that to go on by the president directly? Where does it say directly in the Constitution? There is no direct claim. That's added to it by what Woodrow Wilson did, because now it can be placed before the public through radio and TV later on. And that's a way of cultivating and captivating the public. So who authorized these hearings today? Television has authorized it. It's a cartoon show. And that's all, folks. Just like in Looney Tunes. That's all it is. It's authorized by the camera. You show it to me in the document. These people in Washington don't have no respect for this country. And they absolutely do not have any respect for the framers of this country. And that's where we are now. That's where we are. I'm going to call these imposters out. Every day that there's breath in my body, and I'm going to defend what this country put in. I'm going to call them out. That's what I'm going to That's what I'm going to do. Because they're not serious. These people are not serious running this country. And they're $37 trillion, it says it. $37 trillion of debt. That says they're not serious. To put this country in this kind of jeopardy is just one aspect. But you saw it. Whoopi Goldberg saw it last week. Her house was burned down in Los Angeles. And the Los Angeles Times owner of that newspaper came out on TV. Well, I don't know if it's on television when they did it. They put it on television. He's up there, woe is me, crying, not crying tears, but crying about his endorsement of Karen Bass as a mayor of Los Angeles. And now he's decrying that the paper endorsed her. Well, he should be crying about the endorsement he made before that. And then the cover-up of Biden's condition, because Los Angeles Times endorsed Biden. You think that they didn't know about the condition? These people that think that you get elected and you start traveling all over the world and kissing, playing basketball as Gavin Newsom was doing, and they're up there wrestling, and he's having such a good time. And look how wonderful these people are. The children, look how the children they're treating the children. At some point, you're going to have to govern. And when that day came for Karen Bass in Los Angeles, look at how unprepared she was to do that. And then look at how people are acting like they're so surprised that she was not prepared to govern. They just found it out last week, you see. And Gavin Newsom over there running the kind of state he's running and not running it well. And they were getting ready to put this man up there to run for president. Fortunately, that's been taken off the table now because you can't be that incompetent in front of the public, and then even the public that's not so discerning will not see it. And so everybody's aware of him now. That door has been closed, hopefully. You never know. Because the press can rehabilitate and then they can pull the wool again over people's eyes as they did in order to tell them they were watching a man who belongs in a home somewhere. He doesn't belong in the White House. Biden belongs in a home somewhere, getting some care. This man needs some assistance from a caretaker. He does not belong in the White House. But am I saying that and you're now finally realizing that you didn't understand that prior to this program? Not really. You're just simply in denial because you believe what you see on television. And they didn't pick that up. And that's why they got these hearings today on television. They understand if you put it on TV, people believe that stuff is real. There's nothing real about that. It's not authorized anywhere. It's not authorized anywhere. I'm telling you, it's not authorized. That's not what the Constitution calls for in Article 2, Section 2, Clause 2. And there's nobody can show it to me. Sure, if you can show it to me, where? Just tell me. Don't show it. Tell me where I can find it in the document. It's an abomination. You don't know it's an abomination. I know it because I know the document. I'm the only one saying it's an abomination. It's an abomination for these persons that are going up there seeking the friendship and approval of members of the Senate to be confirmed. And that particularly is an estrangement from the document, given what has happened since the document was ratified and since it was in fact drawn up. Two different dates for that. 1787, 1788, the drafting of it, and then the ratification of it. Two different dates. But that's particularly galling today because the reason why they're going before the Senate, you scholars listen carefully here. The reason why they're going there, why the Senate is involved in the confirmation is because the senators were representatives of the states. And that's why you have a bicameral legislative branch. You didn't have a bicameral legislative branch at first. You had a unicameral government. But the reason why you have a bicameral government is because a bicameral legislator is because the bicameral legislator was in order to empower the people in one part of the legislative branch and then empower the states in the other branch. And then the states sending both of them to watch the federal government. That's why they're there. And that's why they're not worth 2 cents because they're not doing that. The federal government was created by the states and they sent their own representatives to watch what they had created. That's why they were there. And they're not doing the watchdog public responsibility, and that's why they're irrelevant up there. And it's really galling to have to go before them to get confirmation now because they're no longer speaking the name of the states. Isn't that true? By the 17th Amendment of the Constitution of the United States, which took away while the framers gave them 6 years, 2 years more than the president as their term in office. Has anybody examined that? Why are they giving the senators 6 years and giving the president 4 years? Why? Because the state representatives were the ones that had created all the rest of the federal system, the legitimacy of which they did not create the federal system through the 10th Amendment and then turn it loose upon the people to do what they wanted to do. I want to tell you, scholars, this. You referring to a national government. Where? Where is there a national government? That's a problem that's a problem now. The Constitution doesn't authorize a national government. There's a federal government. And a national government is very different from a federal government. The national government destroys the original intent, absolutely obliterates it. And they've been doing some obliteration, quite frankly, of the Constitution piece by piece. I criticized in an article I wrote yesterday where I criticized their hero, Oliver Wendell Holmes. They love Oliver Wendell Holmes. He's the one that is the author of this idea that you can limit free speech in this country because you cannot stand up in the theater and holler fire. And they use that to say that if you cannot do that, and they're claiming that you cannot do it based upon speech, you therefore can in fact restrict speech because you can't do that. Well, I hate to tell you something. I have the Declaration of Independence right here in this book, and I'm going to read to you where it says what it says in the First Amendment, and you say in there, does it say should anywhere? Let me read the document as written. Let me read the First Amendment as written, and you tell me where there's any wiggle room in this language, and help me out with this if you think you're qualified. Here's the amendment. Congress shall make no law, and it goes on. I'll jump over some words here, but I'm not excluding into the meaning of this speech claim. Congress shall make no law, ... 3 dots, not 4, because there's no period here. Let me get to the part about the speech. Prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech. Congress should make no law respecting, and I jumped over some words here, or abridging, to abridge it, to abridge it, the freedom of speech. And Oliver Wendell Holmes, being a crafty judge, he's worse than McCann, they call him, the guy that was telling Trump to Godspeed after bringing him into court. Of course, Trump didn't show up. He had to be there through remote. They can do that through remote means now. But after crucifying the law, to try to show that he was not doing anything personal. It's all about legality. Nothing legal about what happened in that courtroom from day one until let's see, he did the ruling on the 10th. From day one until he finally rid himself of the case, but the case is not over yet. He's very sly in what he did. You didn't catch what he did, but I want to tell you what he did there. What he did was to require nothing of Trump, require no fine, require no jail time, anything like that. Of course, you're not going to put the president in jail, but not to require anything. Not to say we're going to come back and revisit the case in after 4 years and then prosecute the president. Didn't say anything like that, and hoping then what would happen, because he's still in office, he still goes forward, he still does the inauguration on the 20th, so no harm, no foul. But yet the verdict stands, and they hope what Trump will do was quit the process. You didn't actually get any penalty, and you're still going to go in their office and all the rest of it. So fait accompli and case closed. But that's not going to happen. What the lawyer need to do is continue to fight the claim of the indictment and the 34 charges leveled against me, and they indicted him and convicted him on each one, to go back and change that, to get the ruling. And I was listening to Mark Levine. Mark Levine, let me tell you something. Your claim that the court the Supreme Court should have come in and stopped this process. On what basis can they stop the process down there? Article 3 sets up the original jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. Other than the original things that can be carried directly to the court and is stated in the Constitution what they are, everything else then carries out the function of the Supreme Court as an appellate court. And Mark Levine was acting this past weekend as if what McCann did is the last word. The last word is the appellate of it, and it has and the court is not going to intervene, nor should they have intervened, because now we're talking about the Supreme Court being brought in as its appeal up through the level to which it makes the final verdict. And the final verdict should be all that junk is thrown out. But for the court to ask the court to jump the gun because it disagrees with what's going on down there is inappropriate for the Supreme Court of the United States to, in fact, do that. See, we don't have no respect for the rule of law in this country. There's no respect for it. Even people who claim that they have certain respect for it do not understand how disrespectful they are by asking people to get out of line and do that which is not authorized by the Constitution. If it's not authorized by the Constitution, don't do it. It's as simple as that.
I don't know if you watch like where they call it the cop audits, where the First Amendment people, the cops, or even people doing cops pulling people over. They, they've got a plethora of them. I'll send you the links. And they people like will respond when people stand up for it on their, civil rights and stuff. They'll say, "Well, why don't you just give them the ID? Why do I? You got to be so mean to the police officers.
Yeah.
It's like you got to stand up for yourself. Oh no, you just put too much emphasis on it. It's not that big of a deal.
Yeah, right. It's a big deal. The law is a big deal. That's why, and we got to stop thinking that the politicians are a big deal. That's not a big deal. We got to stop thinking that the members of the Supreme Court is a big deal. They're not a big deal either. You know what the big deal is? The big deal is a law and a rule of law. That's a big deal. And that's why you don't find any word in the Constitution. You don't even find the word in the Constitution, politician, not even written one time in the Constitution. Because to the framers, that was irrelevant. What was relevant was the rule of law in this country. And they were meticulous in making sure they were clear in what they were saying about what the rule of law is, and what they were doing was chaining the government down so as to follow it. That's why the shells are in every part of the constitutional document except Amendment 10. But I'll tell you why it's not in 10. You could saw us listen very carefully here. The reason why it's not in Amendment 10 is because Amendment 10 is not there for a number of reasons, but in Amendment 10, what Amendment 10 does, it sets up the federal system. That which is granted to the states, that which is granted to the federal government, that's what they can do under Article 1, Section 8, the 18 clauses that are found therein. That which is not delegated away from the states to the federal government, and they therefore can authorize to have those claims. That which is not delegated is retained by the states. And that right there is that's a big shall not, without the word shall not being placed there. You don't need shall not there, because the federal system says it more loud than any words can say it. Because of the allegation of power on the different levels of the federal system, the federal level and the state level. That's why I argue that you don't have a national government, you have a federal government. A national government is what they're now assuming they have, and that's why they want to make the claim they can then do all this, even if it is in violation of the strictures that were placed upon and restraints placed upon the federal government by the states in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 8, the 18 clauses found there in that part of the Constitution. I'm right here, and those scholars are going to say otherwise. I dare them to even say anything. I dare them to say anything publicly. They're just as quiet as a church mouse. Not because they agree with me, but because they're not qualified to disagree with me. I'm from the lowly, lowly. Because it's not one of those Ivy League universities. And I have nothing but contempt for those persons who they've sent out here, because they've sent them out here as false prophets, and they've gotten away with it. Because we don't go behind them to study what they should have been doing and what they're doing now, and so on and so forth, and what they're authorized to do based upon the document. Many people believe that the law of the land is what the Supreme Court and the justices say. They really believe that. And it's really sickening, quite frankly, for these scholars to go on television and talk about the Supreme Court said this, and the Supreme Court said that, and they have now memorized case law as if case law is the constitutional law. The case law is the Supreme Court law. Judges have decided upon this and are subject to change their mind at another date and time, as they've done repeatedly throughout the history of the country. I'm telling you that the law of the land is not the Supreme Court. Just 9 more politicians, differently dressed than the other politicians are, and the politicians are differently dressed than the man and woman on the street. Although Fetterman is very close to that, and he is, in fact, by his dress, bringing them down to a more ordinary level, because they've been very ordinary. John, we're wrapping up.
Okay, good. No, I was going to say, lately I don't know if you've been watching our shows, but we talk about John Fetterman a lot. And what he's saying like he's going to stand with Trump and talk to Trump. He's not going to denounce Trump. He's not going to sneer at Trump. He's willing to work with Trump because he represents the people of his state and all that. And everybody's like, to me that's just welcome. I'm just overwhelmed by that.
Fetterman is a legitimate. Everybody thinks this guy is off the wall because of the way he dressed and so on and so forth. I could care less of how they dress if they were governed. Karen Bass dressed very well. How is she governing? Gavin Newsom always got a shirt and tie on. He's always got his hair combed and all the rest of it. Okay, fine. He governs terribly. That's a litmus test right there. And Fetterman, if I were in Pennsylvania, I'd vote for him in a heartbeat. He'd be the only Democrat in Pennsylvania that I could vote for. The rest of those guys, you can get them out of here. But this man, and this man is more serious than 99% of them that's in the government. 99, more than 99%. There's got to be some fractions are involved in that. They're not serious. I don't find any of them to be serious because the Constitution doesn't authorize what they're doing, and somebody in the body should be saying that. But we got to depend upon an outsider to come and say that which has to be said. We're not relying upon Donald Trump to go in there and do some correction because they're not going to do it inside. They've already shown that over the entire history of the country. This didn't just started last week. Anyway, I have to wrap up here, but I will tell you that the originalists are those persons who were in that room writing that document. Those are the originalists. All the rest of them that are claiming to be originalists, those are the people who are the Johnny-come-latelys, who endorsed the document in its unoriginal state, the amendments and so on and so forth. If that's your idea of being an originalist, your idea is faulty. Hamilton, Madison, John Jay. And then we got to also come and say some things about that as well. But that's where we are with that. Okay, got to get out of here. I'm running over my time as usual. We'll see you next week. Until next week, we want you to follow your dream. If you don't follow your dream, you will never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.